The main character in today's case is Fang, a young woman born in 1989 into an ordinary working-class family in China. Her father was a taxi driver, and her mother worked at a factory. Although the family wasn't wealthy, they managed to get by comfortably enough. From the moment Fang was born, she became the most precious treasure of the entire family, the hope and pride of her parents. Watching their daughter grow up to be both intelligent and beautiful, always at the top of her class academically, the couple couldn't have been more proud. They were determined that even if they had to scrimp and save every penny, they would make sure their daughter received a proper education so she could have a brighter future. When Fang entered high school, she began expressing a desire to see the world beyond China's borders. As parents, they understood their daughter's aspirations and saw no reason not to support such a legitimate dream. In 2006, at just 17 years old, Fang lived up to her parents' expectations and successfully secured an opportunity to study abroad in Australia. That day at the airport, her parents stood there seeing her off with red-rimmed eyes, their hearts full of reluctance to let their little girl go. But deep in their eyes, even more than the reluctance, was an overwhelming worry. They knew that once their daughter left the country, thousands of miles away in a foreign land, they really wouldn't be able to help her much anymore. Their financial means were simply too limited. Understanding her parents' concerns, Fang gently reassured them that students at foreign universities all worked part-time jobs to support themselves, that it was completely normal, and that she was fully capable of taking care of herself. During her first days in Australia, Fang found everything around her incredibly fresh and exciting. Sydney appeared before her eyes even more bustling and lively than she had ever imagined. Stepping onto the university campus, Fang felt a completely different atmosphere, one filled with freedom and openness that she had never experienced before. She was thrilled about this new chapter in her life. Fang decided to major in physical therapy, a field that didn't require extremely advanced technical skills, but offered stable job prospects after graduation. Just as she had been back home, Fang maintained her diligent study habits, always giving her best effort and achieving excellent grades. But while dreams are beautiful, reality can be brutally harsh. The cost of living in Sydney was shockingly high. Rent, food, and daily expenses were all extremely expensive. The money her parents had saved up for her to bring along was nearly depleted after paying for rent and tuition, leaving almost nothing in her pocket. Fang couldn't help but feel disheartened watching her classmates around her. Every one of their families seemed to be sitting on a gold mine. Money was apparently never an issue for them. They wore nothing but designer clothes, rarely ate at the school cafeteria, instead ordering delivery or going out to restaurants together, living extremely comfortable lives. Witnessing this disparity every single day, the gap in Fang heart grew larger and larger. She knew she couldn't ask for more money from home. Her parents were just ordinary workers, and the family's entire savings had already been spent on her first year's tuition. After settling in, Fang immediately threw herself into working multiple part-time jobs without rest. Supermarket cashier, restaurant server, apprentice at a beauty salon. She tried every kind of job imaginable. The work was exhausting and the pay was low, but she gritted her teeth and carried on through it all. During that period, she spun like a top, attending classes in the morning and working in the afternoon, rotating continuously without a single day off, never getting enough sleep. But it was precisely because of those grueling months that she managed to maintain her studies in Australia. Finally, after years of struggling through, Fang graduated from university, obtained her physical therapy certification, and found a job in her field right there in Australia. She could have settled into a stable life as a professional in her field, living a reasonably respectable existence. But reality slapped her hard in the face once again. The actual salary wasn't as high as she had imagined. Still, when she received her first paycheck, Fang felt fairly happy, because at least it was a decent, stable job. Working from 9 to 5, she no longer had to scramble around doing all sorts of odd jobs everywhere, like she did as a student. She also finally had some free time to rest and enjoy life. Not long after, at a party, Fang happened to meet a few girls. These girls were also quite attractive. Through conversation, she learned that their family backgrounds were also just ordinary, nothing special. But the lifestyle they were living absolutely astonished Fang. These girls didn't need to work office jobs or any regular profession. They just needed to accompany wealthy businessmen for meals and conversation, or spend a little time at hotels, and the money they earned was more than what an average person made in an entire year of hard work. They drove luxury cars, lived in spacious apartments, and the designer handbags in their hands changed constantly, one after another. The lavish and glamorous lifestyle of these girls hit Fang like a shock. Comparisons and doubts about life's fairness began forming in her mind. She told herself that her looks were no worse than those girls. In fact, in many ways, she had an advantage over them because she held a legitimate degree recognized in Australia. Yet her life was so miserable, difficult, and lacking, while they got to enjoy an affluent lifestyle without having to try very hard. In this distant and unfamiliar country of Australia, she had spent years working herself to the bone, doing all kinds of exhausting jobs just to earn enough money for tuition and living expenses. She was so busy that she didn't even have time to make friends, to go out and have fun, to enjoy the most beautiful years of her youth like her peers. Now that she had finally graduated and had a stable job, her monthly salary still wasn't enough to buy a single designer handbag that those girls casually carried around every day like it was nothing. Thinking about this, Fang felt it was all too ironic and unfair. A thought began to take shape in her mind, growing clearer and clearer. She too had to find a way to live an elegant and comfortable life like them. She couldn't keep struggling like this forever. In truth, before making this decision, Fang went through an extremely fierce and prolonged internal struggle. She knew exactly what kind of path she was about to step onto, knew the risks and the price she might have to pay. She convinced herself that this was only a temporary decision, a short phase meant to quickly accumulate savings. Once she had enough to start her own business, she believed she would walk away and return to a more conventional life. Fang adopted the English name Honey, and through private introductions, became involved in a discreet line of work that existed in a legally and personally risky gray area. Among her friends in Sydney, Fang was still seen as a gentle and ambitious young woman pursuing a stable career in physical therapy. The only noticeable change was her frequent travel, as she often went to Adelaide or Melbourne when short-term work opportunities appeared. When money comes too easily and quickly, people can easily sink into it without realizing. Fang was no exception. She quickly got used to this new lifestyle, even beginning to enjoy it. She freely shopped for expensive designer clothes and luxury handbags, frequently visited upscale restaurants to enjoy fine dining, living what she believed was the lifestyle of the upper class. She felt she was quite smart and clever, able to navigate smoothly among different successful men. But what she didn't realize was that from the moment she stepped onto this path, her life had gradually slipped out of her control without her ever knowing. Over the course of a year and a half, Fang had flown to Adelaide a total of 8 times. Each trip brought her a fairly generous income. Everything went so smoothly that she gradually became complacent. So when she received a new booking around the end of the year, Fang didn't have the slightest bit of caution or wariness. This time, Fang client was a man named Piao Chungguang, born in 1987 in China. He had come to Australia to make his fortune in 2010 when he was just 23 years old. Chungguang was hardworking and diligent, determined to make as much money as possible so he could make a name for himself in this foreign land. He too started from the dirtiest and most laborious jobs without any complaints. Thanks to his daring spirit and work ethic, within just a few years he had established himself firmly in Adelaide. After that, he used his savings to start his own cleaning company, and business was going quite well. Chungguang even married a woman with Australian citizenship, and together they had a son. In the eyes of everyone around him, Chungguang was the very picture of success worth admiring. The things many immigrants spend their entire lives striving for, he had achieved in just a few years. But Chungguang had one fatal flaw. He was addicted to gambling. From the moment this vice secretly crept into his life, it silently gnawed away at and devoured everything he once had. As his cleaning company business grew more prosperous and money became more abundant, Boss Piao also visited casinos more and more frequently, betting larger and larger amounts each time. Gradually, all the money the company earned was completely poured into gambling by Chung Guang. When he ran short on cash, he started borrowing from friends. But the debt kept piling up while he only borrowed and never repaid. Eventually, friends became wary and started avoiding him. Chung Guang began turning to loan sharks, but the interest rates from loan sharks immediately crushed him. To pay off his debts, he could only rob Peter to pay Paul. The cleaning company that had been doing so well and providing stable income was ruined by him. Chung Guang began deceiving his wife, hiding the family's true financial situation. The young boss, who once exuded confidence and vigor, had now transformed into a miserable gambler, his face creased with worry all day long, being chased by creditors everywhere. By December 2014, Chung Guang's situation had become worse than ever. Debt collection calls rang incessantly, threatening text messages from loan sharks came one after another, each arriving before he could even finish reading the last. His life had become nothing but a series of days spent running and hiding in fear. Boss Piao, once so proud and successful, had truly reached a dead end with nowhere left to turn. Finally, he had no choice but to pawn the company's Volkswagen Caddy, his last remaining asset, for 8,000 Australian dollars, approximately 5,200 US dollars. But tragically, as soon as he got this seemingly life-saving money in his hands, he took the entire amount straight back to the casino once again. The only thought in his head at that moment was to make one final bet to turn everything around, to win back everything he had lost. But the outcome was utterly predictable. In the blink of an eye, the entire $8,000 was completely gone, not a single dollar left. Empty-handed, pockets completely empty, he staggered out of the casino doors. Standing on the sidewalk watching the traffic pass by, a sense of desperation and fear unlike anything he had ever felt in his life washed over him. Old debts remained unpaid, and now new debts were piling up even higher. He had no idea how to face tomorrow. And just a few hours before he went to meet Fang, he received an ultimatum from the loan sharks with cold, terrifying content. Deliver $3,000, approximately 1,950 US dollars, by tomorrow, or they would make him wish he was dead. As early as December 29, 2014, Fang followed her usual routine and booked a flight from Sydney to Adelaide. After landing, she took a taxi to a familiar 4-star hotel in the city centre. The check-in process was quick and smooth, as she was already very familiar with the procedures. This time, she planned to stay for 3 days to complete the appointments that had been arranged in advance. The person responsible for contacting clients and coordinating her schedule was a driver named Shin. He had arrived in the city 2 days earlier to prepare everything ahead of time. Shin's role was to communicate with clients via WeChat, arrange specific times and locations, pick Fang up from the airport, and take her to the hotel. During this seemingly calm period, Fang had no idea that danger was quietly drawing closer. Chung Guang, a man trapped in a desperate situation, managed to trace Shin's intermediary network through a WeChat group. He carefully browsed through multiple profiles before stopping on Fang. Under the name Honey, she appeared young, well-presented, and discreet, giving the impression of someone living comfortably. In Chung Guang's distorted reasoning, she seemed like the most suitable choice. From that moment on, Fang unknowingly became the focus of a criminal plan that was gradually taking shape. The first few days passed without incident. The scheduled appointments proceeded as planned, and everything appeared to be under Fang control. As she grew accustomed to this closed and repetitive routine, her sense of alertness gradually faded. Without realizing it, she began to lower her guard, unaware of the danger that was already approaching. On December 31st, Chung Guang used a WeChat account to book an appointment with Fang for 1 hour, scheduled for 10 p.m. Before leaving home, he had carefully prepared for his plan. He was cunning enough to know he shouldn't bring a knife or club, because those were too obvious and would easily be discovered if anyone checked. Instead, he chose something much more discreet and unsuspicious. He bought a brand new pack of razor blades, pulled one out, and tucked it neatly into his wallet. The thing was thin yet razor sharp, and no one would notice or suspect it. Additionally, Chung Guang deliberately wore a black jacket, clearly intending to conceal his identity and avoid being clearly captured by security cameras. At exactly 10 p.m., Chung-guang appeared right on time at the hotel lobby. He kept his head down and quickly stepped into the elevator, trying not to attract anyone's attention. The elevator stopped at the 12th floor, and he walked down the hallway to a room. The door opened, and Fang welcomed him inside. After the service began for a while, around 10:40 p.m., Chung-guang suddenly made Fang an offer she couldn't refuse. He said he was willing to pay 2,100 Australian dollars, approximately 1,365 US dollars, to spend the entire night with her until the next morning. Fang was overjoyed when she heard this. Normally, her overnight rate was only 1,500 Australian dollars, approximately 975 US dollars, but this client was voluntarily offering to pay an extra $600. How wonderful! Moreover, after chatting for a bit, she got the impression that Chung-guang seemed to have some health issues. Surely he wouldn't need much actual service from her. She thought to herself, wasn't this like a gift falling from the sky? Only a fool would pass up easy money like this. Fang immediately grabbed her phone to text Shin about the situation. Shin also thought this was quite a profitable deal and readily agreed. He helped Fang contact and cancel the 2 clients who had appointments scheduled afterward. Fang relaxed, settling down and thinking she would comfortably earn all her New Year's Eve money with ease. Time passed, and when the clock struck midnight, Fang excitedly grabbed her phone to send Happy New Year wishes to her friends, but she paid absolutely no attention to the quiet man sitting beside her. She didn't notice that in his eyes gleamed a terrifying look, like a hungry wolf eyeing its prey, just waiting for the right moment to strike. Time continued to tick by slowly in the quiet hotel room. Fang lay comfortably on the soft bed, phone in hand, leisurely scrolling through social media. Occasionally, she would look up and make small talk with Chung-guang to keep up some atmosphere, asking a few polite questions to pass the time. Meanwhile, Chung-guang sat silently in a corner of the room, outwardly appearing relaxed and calm, but inside his head he was constantly calculating and waiting for the perfect moment to make his move. The midnight bells marking New Year's Eve had long since chimed. The year 2015 had officially begun. Outside the hotel window, colorful fireworks exploded brilliantly across Adelaide's sky. The entire city was immersed in the jubilant, festive atmosphere of welcoming the new year. Chung-guang suddenly spoke up, breaking the silence, saying he needed to use the bathroom for a moment. Fang didn't pay any attention, just mumbling a response before returning her focus to her phone. As he stood up from his seat, Chung-guang's eyes, sharp as an eagle's, silently swept around the room, observing and searching for places where Fang might have stashed money and valuables. His gaze finally stopped at her designer handbag, carelessly tossed on the nearby sofa. The man slowly walked into the bathroom and closed the door behind him, but he didn't reach to turn on the faucet. Instead, he quietly reached into his wallet and pulled out the thin but razor-sharp blade he had carefully prepared before coming here. He slowly looked up at the large mirror in front of him, and the face reflected there had completely transformed, twisted and distorted by extreme tension and steely determination to commit the crime he was about to carry out. Stepping out of the bathroom, Chung-guang didn't immediately rush to attack but tried to control himself, maintaining an outward appearance of calm as if nothing was happening. He gave a light cough to get her attention, then spoke in a natural voice as if he had just remembered something. He said he hadn't brought enough cash with him and needed to go down to the hotel lobby to find an ATM to withdraw money to pay her before continuing. This excuse sounded perfectly reasonable and normal, nothing suspicious about it at all. Fang heard it and didn't have the slightest doubt. In this profession, clients paying up front before services was a basic rule everyone followed. She had encountered similar situations many times before. She put her phone down on the bed, nodded in agreement casually, and prepared to stand up to accompany the client downstairs to the lobby. As Fang bent down to grab the red high heels sitting beside the bed, her entire back and the back of her head were completely turned toward Chung-guang, without the slightest hint of caution or alertness. She was focused on slipping her feet into the shoes, completely unaware that danger was lurking right behind her. At the very moment she was in this completely defenseless position, Chungguang decided this was the perfect opportunity to strike. He lunged toward her fast as an arrow, but he didn't use the sharp razor blade he had carefully prepared in his wallet. Instead, in a split second, he grabbed the other high heel that Fang hadn't yet put on, raised it high above his head, and with all his strength brought it crashing down onto the back of her skull. Before Fang could even let out a single cry, her entire body crumpled like a puppet with its strings cut, falling face first onto the floor. The pain overwhelmed her, leaving her completely dazed, her mind spinning, unable to resist or think clearly. Yet her powerful survival instinct still drove her to try to struggle, to try to get up, her mouth letting out weak cries for help in the hope that someone might hear. But this determined resistance only made Chungguang even more panicked and terrified of being discovered. He quickly pounced on her, clamping his hand tightly over her mouth to prevent any cries for help from escaping. Fang desperately struggled to resist, her survival instinct driving her to use every ounce of remaining strength to fight for her life. Her fingernails clawed frantically at the attacker's arms and face, leaving bleeding scratches. The previously quiet hotel room descended into chaos with the sounds of scuffling and struggling. But this was a fight with a severe imbalance of physical strength between a grown man and a small woman. As Fang desperately thrashed about, Chungguang completely lost control of himself. Fear of being discovered combined with his frenzied state left him unable to think anymore. He raised the high heel high again, bringing it down relentlessly and mercilessly on Fang head and face over and over. Gradually, Fang resistance weakened, growing fainter and fainter, until she could no longer move at all. The room sank into a terrifying silence. Chungguang panted heavily, his body drenched in sweat, looking down at the motionless figure beneath him. He reached out to touch Fang and discovered she was still barely breathing. Without a moment's hesitation, he immediately reached into his pocket and pulled out the sharp razor blade he had prepared beforehand, slashing it straight across Fang throat. A life of just 25 years, with an entire future ahead of her, was extinguished and sealed forever on the first day of the new year, while outside the window fireworks still blazed brilliantly across Adelaide's sky. Chungguang staggered into the bathroom, his hands and feet trembling from what had just happened. He hurriedly turned on the faucet, trying to wash the blood covering his hands. Then he found some wet wipes to clean the razor blade, throwing both items into the sink in an attempt to destroy all evidence. Stepping out of the bathroom, he looked at Fang body lying motionless on the floor, blood still spreading in pools. He hastily pulled the bedsheet down, carelessly wrapping it around the unfortunate girl's corpse, then took a bath towel to cover her disfigured face. Once done, he began frantically ransacking the room, searching for money and valuables. Chungguang found approximately 4,000 Australian dollars, about 2,600 US dollars, in cash stored in the nightstand drawer. He also took Fang latest model iPhone. He knew full well that the phone contained the entire chat history with the agency, ironclad evidence that needed to be destroyed immediately. However, strangely, he didn't take all the money Fang had in the room. Later during the investigation, police theorized that the killer, in his panicked and hurried state, simply didn't think about other places in the room that might contain hidden cash. Of course, there was also another theory, that he deliberately left some money behind to mislead the investigation, making police think this was a murder motivated by personal vendetta or romantic conflict rather than a robbery homicide. At 12:34 a.m., Chungguang slipped out of the hotel like a ghost. He didn't head straight to the parking lot like a normal person would, but instead ran around frantically like a madman on the deserted streets near the hotel, circling back and forth twice as if trying to confirm no one was following him. Only then did he finally get into his car and disappear into the still night. To say Chungguang was a reckless and thoughtless criminal would be no exaggeration, because the place he chose to commit his crime was a 4-star hotel with tight security and surveillance systems. He never considered that the fingerprint he left on the sole of the high heel, along with the countless security cameras positioned throughout the hotel, had already woven a net of justice from which there was no escape. The first person to discover something was wrong was actually a guest staying in a room on the 11th floor, directly below Fang room. They were awakened in the middle of the night by water dripping from the ceiling, and the clothes in their suitcase on the floor were soaking wet. Angry and annoyed, the guest immediately picked up the phone and called the front desk to complain about the problem. At the same time, Xin, the person responsible for coordinating Fang Ting's appointments, was also anxiously pacing outside. According to the schedule, he was supposed to pick up Fang Ting to take her to the airport at 7 a.m. But he had called over and over countless times and still couldn't reach her. Neither her cell phone nor the hotel room phone was being answered. An ominous feeling began rising in his heart. However, the first thing he worried about wasn't that Fang Ting might have encountered some danger, but rather that she might have run off with all the money she'd earned over the past few days. If that were the case, he and the agency would suffer heavy losses. At 7:55 a.m., after trying everything and still unable to contact Fang Ting, Xin decided he had to go up and check for himself. He took out the backup room key he kept for handling emergencies, went up to the 12th floor, and opened the door to her room. The moment he pushed the door open, the room inside was pitch black, the window curtains drawn tightly shut. In that eerie silence, the only sound was water running continuously from the bathroom. Xin tiptoed inside step by step, his heart pounding with anxiety and fear. When he rounded the corner of the bed, he suddenly saw something on the floor wrapped in a white sheet. Mustering all his courage, he slowly bent down and used his trembling, uncontrollable fingers to lift the towel covering the thing's face. What appeared before his eyes made him freeze in horror. It was a face both familiar and terrifying, twisted and disfigured. It was Fang Ting. Xin was so frightened his legs turned to jelly, completely devoid of strength. He scrambled and crawled frantically out of that room of death. But the first thing he thought of wasn't calling the police. Instead, he hurriedly called his boss Chen to ask for instructions. When Chen received the news and rushed over, the two of them went back into the room together once more. Standing before that horrifying and gruesome scene, they could only look at each other in silence, completely at a loss for how to handle the situation. Finally, they both retreated outside, standing in a daze in the hallway. Right at that moment, the hotel manager was coming up to the 12th floor to deal with the water leak issue that the guests downstairs had complained about. When he stepped out of the elevator, he saw two Asian men standing in the hallway with unusually panicked and frightened expressions on their faces. Sensing something was wrong, he approached to inquire and quickly discovered the serious situation inside the room. At 8:35 a.m., the hotel manager immediately called the police. Detectives from the major crime unit, along with the Adelaide forensics team, quickly arrived at the scene. They immediately sealed off the entire area and conducted a meticulous examination of the crime scene for over 30 hours, not overlooking even the smallest detail. Xin and Chen, as the first people to discover the body, were also taken to the station for questioning. Under the pressure of the investigation, they both quickly confessed their relationship with the victim. Thanks to the crucial information these two provided, police established a clear direction for the investigation and began narrowing down the list of suspects. Through analyzing the chat history on phones and messaging apps, police quickly identified the last person to have contact with Fang Ting as Chung Guang. After extracting and carefully reviewing the hotel's entire security camera system, they confirmed that Chung Guang had entered Fang Ting's room before 10 p.m. on December 31st and left the hotel at 12:34 a.m. the following morning. In the early morning hours of January 1st, police raided Chung Guang's home in the western suburbs of Adelaide. At the time, he was sleeping in bed with his wife and young son. Police interrogated him on the spot for 2.5 hours. Throughout the entire process, Chung Guang maintained a suspiciously calm demeanor, answering every question fluently and coherently. He didn't deny having met Fang Ting that evening, but insisted that because Fang Ting had other clients scheduled afterward, he had voluntarily left around midnight. As for what happened after he left, he claimed to know absolutely nothing. Police searched the entire house, but couldn't find the clothes he had worn when committing the crime. Checking his phone, they discovered that all chat history related to Fang Ting had been completely wiped clean without a trace. In this first round of the battle of wits, police seemingly couldn't gather any direct evidence to charge him. However, the forensics team made crucial breakthroughs. Forensic experts painstakingly compared and recompared their findings, ultimately confirming that the two wounds on Fang Ting's head perfectly matched the distinctive shape of the heel of the red high heels she owned. More importantly, criminal forensic technicians recovered an extremely clear right thumb fingerprint from the sole of the high heel, the very murder weapon. 2 days later, the fingerprint analysis results came back. The fingerprint on the shoe sole belonged to Chung Guang. Faced with undeniable evidence, Chung Guang still tried to stubbornly deny his guilt. He claimed the fingerprint was left there when he helped Fang Ting take off her shoes. However, investigators immediately conducted a demonstration right there to refute this lie. The results clearly showed that when removing someone's shoes normally, fingers simply cannot leave a fingerprint on the shoe sole with that angle and pressure. There was only one possible explanation. Only when someone holds a shoe in their hand with the sole facing outward like a weapon to strike someone could fingers leave marks in that position, and with that amount of force. At the same time, when searching Chung Guang's car, police found a box of razor blades with 18 remaining, the exact same type and model as the blade used as the murder weapon. Right next to the box was the purchase receipt, showing he had bought the blades not long before. Digging deeper into the investigation, police discovered that due to his severe gambling habit, he had amassed an enormous debt to loan sharks. Before the crime occurred, he had virtually nothing left to his name. But strangely, after the crime, his bank account suddenly showed an additional $1,000 plus Australian dollars, approximately $650 plus US dollars, with no clear source. Additionally, police successfully recovered the browsing history on his phone. They discovered that during the period immediately after the crime occurred, he had searched online for how to unlock iPhone if forgot password. This was clearly an attempt to access the phone he had stolen from Fang Ting in order to destroy evidence. On January 9, 2015, with ample evidence in hand, police officially arrested Chung Guang on murder charges. Faced with the mountain of undeniable evidence, Chung Guang finally stopped trying to make excuses or deny the charges. However, he still stubbornly refused to admit that he had killed anyone, insisting to the end that he was innocent. Upon receiving the terrible news, Fang Ting's parents and brother rushed to book flights from China to Australia. When they arrived and heard police recount the details of what kind of life their loved one had actually been living in this foreign country all this time, they felt as if the sky had collapsed before them. The mother was devastated beyond words, sobbing uncontrollably in front of reporters covering the case. She simply couldn't accept the cruel reality that her well-behaved, academically gifted daughter, the one she had always been so proud of, had met such a tragic end in a foreign land. The entire trial proceedings dragged on painfully for everyone involved. In court, Chung Guang showed not the slightest hint of remorse or regret from beginning to end for his brutal actions. He stubbornly insisted he was innocent, arguing that the evidence police presented was merely circumstantial, that using text messages as evidence against him was unfair. Even after being imprisoned, he called police multiple times to complain about all sorts of things. That the prison food was terrible, that the police had ruined his life, that he couldn't be there to watch his young son grow up. Throughout the entire trial, Chung Guang's wife never once spoke up to defend or make excuses for her husband. On August 17, 2016, the Supreme Court of South Australia delivered its final verdict in this case. The jury unanimously found Chung Guang guilty of murder. Piao Chung Guang was subsequently sentenced to life in prison with no possibility of parole for 25 years. This case sent shockwaves through the Chinese community in Australia and left behind many painful lessons. A young woman who had graduated from a prestigious university with a bright future ahead of her, simply because of her desire for a luxurious lifestyle, lost herself in a world of superficial glamour, ultimately becoming a victim of violent crime. And the killer, a man who once had everything in his hands but lost it all to gambling addiction, must now pay the price by spending the rest of his life behind bars. Fang Ting's tragic story serves as a wake-up call for all of us. Money can bring comfort, but shortcuts to quick wealth always carry unimaginable risks. And sometimes the price you pay is your very life, and that's today's case. What are your thoughts about this case? Please share in the comments below. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.